Hi, everybody. Welcome to our first SmartHER event, live event of 2023. I hope you've had a great start to the new year. Here we are into it, just a couple weeks. And I'm excited to start a brand new series with you called SmartHER With, where we get to talk to really interesting people that have an expertise in a certain area that can share their knowledge with us so that we can all live a little bit smarter, because it's not just about the news. That's important. You know, that's my priority. I love the headlines, the why it matters, but also adding some of the experience that life provides us. That's part of reporting, is reaching out to people that really know their stuff. And we have a great first guest today, Nicole Modic of Kale Junkie. That's her account. It's also a blog. You can find all of her stuff at Kale Junkie. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about how to be smarter when it comes to a key item in our household, and that is food. Food has been a huge story over the last several years. Getting food, the price of food, sourcing it, all of it. And so I want to give you a little bit of a background on that before we bring Nicole in, and I'm so excited for her to answer all of your questions and tell us a little bit about her story. But just to set the stage, listen to this. Did you know it was last year not last year, it was 3 years ago, exactly to this moment, where there was a clinic in Washington State that was soon going to accept the first person that was positive that we know of with COVID-19 in America. 3 years ago, very first case. And you know, if you look back to 2020 at the time, we all heard that news, but it didn't necessarily immediately affect our life. And then a couple months later, everything started to turn upside down. And with that also came all sorts of disruptions for things in our life that we took for granted, like going to the grocery store. Do you remember the lines at the grocery store, or a certain amount of people being let into a grocery store at the time, or the rush for supplies, or wiping down your groceries? Some of this stuff I think I've blocked out, but some of it is still, that has become a little bit of the norm of seeing things on the shelf one week and not seeing them the next, seeing volatile price changes, not really knowing what to expect. That's been a little bit of the norm over the last couple of years. Can you think about that? 3 years ago? 3 years ago, that's where we were. And now we're kind of looking towards the next chapter of the pandemic and kind of where we are in America right now when it comes to the economy. Let's talk a little bit about food prices. I don't know about you. Certainly we saw, at the beginning of the pandemic, so much going on. It was hard to keep track of. It was really, I would say, last year where suddenly I kept on going to the grocery store. It was very consistent, and seeing these bills that I've just never seen before for the very basic items that I just normally bought. You know, milk, eggs, lunch stuff for the kids, a little bit of that, a little frozen pizza. Always have to have that in the refrigerator. And really noticing the bill is going up so significant. So here's a little context for you. From December of last year, 2022, to December of 2021. So we're going to look at a year difference. Here's how much some prices have risen. All right. Eggs. This was a big one for a lot of you as we've covered this. We haven't seen a rate of increase in eggs like we've seen since the 1970s. Egg prices have increased about 60%. Flour and prepared flour mixes have increased more than 23%. Bread is up 16%. Rice, pasta, cornmeal up 15%. Butter up 31%. This one got me. Spices, seasonings, condiments, and sauces up almost 12%. Overall, food prices have gone up about 12% year over year, but you can see in some areas, I mean, if you're going to buy a couple dozen eggs, you're really paying a lot. Here's the price. The national average for 1 dozen eggs, over $4 in December. A year earlier, it was just under $2. So, I mean, if you're feeling it, it's real. It's real. So that brings us to, what do we do? How do we become smarter shoppers? How do we become better with how we're managing food in our household? How do we also stay healthy? It's the beginning of the year. We're all looking at our diet a little bit different, right? It's that time. So this is a great time to talk to Nicole because she covers all of this: healthy eating, smart eating, good food preparation. If you haven't seen her account, you got to. And if you don't have her cookbook, which I love, you can see I've marked a couple things already. Love to eat, you're missing out. So this is definitely something to check out, especially in a new year. So let me go ahead and bring Nicole in so we can talk to her and see, because we actually met. News can actually bring people together. I know sometimes it's about the togetherness of a news network. You don't necessarily associate that, but it was actually news that brought Nicole and I
Yes,
together, right, Nicole?
you
That's
had
how
an
we ended up
incredible story
connecting.
about Armenia, and obviously that's near and dear to my heart as a full Armenian woman here in America. It was really nice to see you talking about it when a lot of other sources kind of glossed over something that it is a really important issue and near and dear to my heart. So thank you for that.
Of course, and that's just have to put it out there because I'm a little bit of a foreign policy nerd. Armenia, Azerbaijan, the conflict in that area is so important for so many reasons, including the fact that you get a lot of people that like to get their hands in there.
Yep.
Russia, Turkey, Iran, the US, and beyond. So we're going to make sure that we always keep an eye on that story. Now I have a great story. I can't reach out. Just said, Nicole, can you help me with this? So wait, tell me a little bit about your family. When did they
so my
immigrate
mom
to the
was
United
born
States?
in Los Angeles. My dad came to this country in the 70s. So he's been here, and that's how they met here in America. And, he's, traditional, typical 100% Middle Eastern. My mom was more Americanized, and somehow that worked.
Well, one of the great, these are the love stories that we hear about. That actually, with my grandparents, my grandmother was born here. My grandfather was born in Italy, and so they had to, merge those cultures together. And that it's interesting when you have that culture in your family, how much it influences big things,
For
but then
sure.
it's like the little things too, like the spices that you keep in your house, or like how you talk to each other. You realize,
no,
have you been to
on my
Armenia?
bucket
Have you guys
list.
traveled
So
there?
I'm really hoping to go one day to see the motherland and, just get more immersed in my own culture.
Well, that sounds, maybe we'll do
Exactly. We'll
smarter
have to
travel
go
sometime.
together.
We can plan trips. Hint,
Yep.
hint. Just in case anyone does that sort of work, we're interested. So I'm so fascinated with your story. And what I loved, I just want everyone to know about this cookbook. I followed Nicole after we first kind of got acquainted. I love her tips on Instagram. I'm a terrible cook, so that I just need to confess that right away. So anything I'm so fascinated and admire her so much. And what I love about her cookbook is it's not just some really amazing recipes, but it's also the story of how she came to this phase in her life. And so, Nicole, you didn't start off thinking, you know what, I'm going to start a business that has to do with food. That was it. What was take us back. So where did you start?
Thank you.
And how did you end up
So
here?
I started my career as an employment attorney, and, growing up in a traditional Armenian household, again, immigrants, there was a lot of pressure to be a doctor or a lawyer. Those were the two choices kind of that I had. And I, wasn't really interested in medicine, but I found myself, I was like, all right, I'll be a lawyer. Really just kind of, my dad really pushed that on me, and it was not my passion. And I felt very stuck in that career for a really long time because that was the skill set that I had. And at the same time, I was knee deep in an eating disorder, because I was trying to control, stress and things in my life that felt very out of control. And the way I did that was really through food. And it wasn't until, I lost my period for 15 years as a result of this eating disorder. And so when I wanted to have a child, it was really hard. Eventually I did, but once I had my first son, I had a mission, and that was to heal, my relationship with food. And I did that, when I was home on maternity leave. I was home with a sleeping baby, and I would spend time in the kitchen creating more nutritious foods of things that I would previously binge on. And I realized that I could, in fact, eat and enjoy all of the foods, but making them with healthier, more nutritious ingredients was a way that I, found healing with food. And it turned out that I started sharing my story and being really open with the healing. And turns out there were a lot of women in particular, and teenagers that were kind of struggling with their relationships with food. And I kind of found that was my passion in life. And slowly but surely, as my Instagram account grew, I was able to transition, through, some brand partnerships and things that I had, slowly shift out of my career in law to making this full time. And now I'm kind of the nerd of, I feel like I totally geek out on the topics that we're going to talk about, which is like saving money, how to make our money go further while still making food, because I am a foodie that tastes really, really good. But how do we do that? We're living in these crazy times.
And then on top of all of that, you're like, oh, I guess we're gonna have to figure out how to do all of this in a pandemic. So then that probably started a whole other level of creativity. How hard was it though to walk away and say, this is what I'm going to do?
It was because I felt like, my skill set, what I went to school for was law. And I remember talking about it in therapy, thinking like that is a great skill set to have. But if I have a passion in food and health and wellness, and I'm unwell because I'm still, had this eating disorder, how can I transition that? So I said to myself, I said, look, I have this skill set. Why don't I give it a go? Why don't I give it a go? Let me give it 1 year. If this doesn't work out for me, if number one, I don't love the career, it's not what I thought it was going to be, I can always go back to that. So when people are coming to me and saying like, oh, I don't, I really want to try this career, I want to do something, I always tell them that I think the first thing to keep in mind is be really good at what you're at first. So that if you try something else and you end up going back, and it's not what you thought it was going to be, you have something to fall back on. So be as good as you can at what you're doing first so that you can kind of come back if turns out it's not what you want it to be. I also think it was my husband who was more risk averse. He's more conservative for sure. I remember being in my office one day and coming home. I thought, I can't go back into this office one more day, and coming home and saying, I can't go back tomorrow. I need to give this a go. And he was like, you can't do that. You can't do that. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to show you. I waited until I kind of earned enough money from this hobby. And I was kind of tracking income over time over the course of 6 months, 8 months. And as I was kind of approaching enough to where I was like, okay, I can still contribute financially to the household. I might not be making what I was as a lawyer, but I could kind of see that trajectory happening. And once I made that leap and closed out that chapter of law, I was able to go in 100% with my passion and quickly bridge that gap. So now he's proud of me, and he talks about like my book and all these things to his friends, and I'm like, see, I knew I could do it, but you just, he's more conservative.
But
I do.
You know what? You need a balance in a relationship, and totally understand that. What does your dad think? Because he was also, that was probably a difficult conversation to have with some of your family, of saying, listen, I did the law thing. I know you were proud of me as an attorney, but now.
And now my dad, it took them a long time because being old school, he was like, wait, what do? You have Instagram, you have a website, you have, what, I don't understand what you're doing or how you make it. So it kind of took time. But, I think once the book came out, he was like, oh, okay, my daughter did something.
Yeah.
Exactly.
He can hold it. He can look through it. He can mark it.
Yeah, he sent pictures from Barnes and Noble standing in front of the book, and it was so cute because Armenian old school dad just standing there. It was cute. Thank you.
Congratulations. That must have been a really big moment. I remember you also posting some videos about seeing your book and having that. And
yes.
It is. There's moments you have to mark those chapters.
Exactly.
Otherwise,
you know how it is.
Of hard work.
Yeah.
Yes, I definitely know. I could definitely appreciate that. So then you say, okay, I like this idea of really working with food full time on a couple different levels. And we're going to get to some of the tips, and I'm going to take questions too, because I really want to make sure that our audience gets what they need too. But how did you figure it out, Nicole? Some of the stuff that you're doing, I'm like, how did she even think about that? Where did that even come from? Talk to us a little bit about what it took to even create some of the content and some of the ideas.
Yeah, a lot of
the
ideas that I have and that I share came from my own pain points in the kitchen. So, something so simple you go to the grocery store and buy a can of coconut milk, which is $4 or $5 sometimes, and a recipe calls for 2 tablespoons, and I'm like, now the old me would take the rest and just throw it away, and I'm like, wait a second, no, what can we, like, let me think about this one step further, and what can I do to save that so that I can make my dollar go further? And like that kind of, my wheels started turning. So like with like things to like, that could help other people along the way, because they helped me. So now I use that can of coconut milk, put them in an ice cube tray, freeze them, pop them in my smoothies. And now my smoothies just got extra creamy, and I've added more nutrients to them. And they also can use those cubes to make my sauces thicker in my soup. So that's one thing. Also, a lot of research. I've, you know, because I'm not a trained chef, I spent a lot of time, you know, researching online, like substitutions for like, you know, for me making more nutritious things, where I spent time looking at, okay, if I have white flour, what can is it a perfect substitute if I use oat flour, for example? And what is the cost difference, right? Like one might be a little more nutritious, but maybe in something else, I might say, you know what, this recipe, you know, or this is my budget for the week, and that doesn't fit this week. Let me use this ingredient instead. So kind of just like, I don't know, my wheels are always turning about like, it's kind of a fun puzzle for me of like ways that I feel like I can, you know, save money and also share those tips with my community.
Yeah. Well, what you're doing is you're problem solving, right? You're like finding all these little solutions of like,
yeah,
let me tell you what happens to that coconut milk that you're talking about. For me, 100%.
Yeah.
You use like half of it or whatever it is. And then I'm like, I cannot throw this away. So I'm going to be proactive and put it in a Tupperware jar. It's going to be in my refrigerator because I'm going to do this again sometime soon. And then 6 months later, I'm like, what is in this? And I find it. And that's why
exactly.
I do this.
No.
And this is why this is why I stick to the news. And now I'm like, what is in my refrigerator that I should have there? You have a million great ideas when it comes to ice cubes. That's one of the areas where it seems like you've been able to find a process that really works for you. So is that a good way to kind of think through it? That was a great example. Is that a money saving thing? Do you do that with a lot of different things? What does your refrigerator look like?
That's good. So I actually buy these cubes that are these trays that are pretty compact, and they have a cover. So they're kind of thin, which is nice, so that you can, and they nicely stack. I use them for tomato paste is another good one, where you open a jar of tomato paste, and fantastic for herbs. So if you have like leftover cilantro, parsley, chives, green onions, if you put those in the ice cube tray, add a little bit of olive oil, that is probably the best. You freeze that, and then you just put that in your, like, pop out a cube, put that in your pan, you add so much flavor to like whatever you're making.
So do you use that with the olive oil?
Just olive oil,
water
and
in
it
it,
freezes.
Or is it just the olive oil? So
yeah, and so like
oil.
that adds so much flavor, but then you're not throwing away those herbs that, you know, at least here in San Francisco are $4 and $5 a bunch for, you know, whatever it is. Yeah.
What a great idea. I definitely am guilty of that with cilantro. Wow. People are going to learn a lot about me. I'm high on the waste factor. I feel like that's something, you know, another thing that happens to me in the refrigerator. I'll just use this as an example. I go out and I'm like, we are going to eat more vegetables. My kids do not eat, and I don't eat enough vegetables. We're going to do it. So we load up, and then half of it goes bad before I get to use it. And I just don't know how, and I don't want to waste food. You know, it depresses me. So what about vegetables? Do you have some tips about how to store things too? That seems
so this is another thing too. Like, I think the old me, like I always say, like the old me would go to the grocery store when, you know, I wouldn't think twice about, you know, I'd look at my grocery bills, but I kind of wouldn't think twice about it. I'd come home, I'd take all the produce, I'd just shove it in the vegetable drawer and fruit drawer and kind of go on with my day. And then, like you said, end up a week later with like rotten, you know, produce. And then I feel bad. I'm like, wow, I bought this. I had good intentions to make something. But there, you know, I think we're all trying to save. So I come home and the first thing I do is thinking about how to properly store it, or how to properly, if it's something that needs to be washed, doing that, it literally takes 5 minutes to properly store something so that it doesn't go bad. For example, you know, lettuce would be a good example, because we all, you know, make salads or whatnot. you come home and, you know, you might think like that you should wash it right away. You know, but actually you bring it home. I like to wrap it in a paper towel. And if you are buying it in a plastic bag, stick it back in that plastic bag. And if you put that in your refrigerator, that will last a week or two if you're not using it sooner than that. And, you know, celery, for example, that's a great one to just chop up in advance, stick it in a mason jar with some water, or wrap it in foil, pop it in the refrigerator, so that like when you don't feel so bad coming back a week or a week and a half later if you haven't had a chance to use it all and it's still there. Really all about just like trying to bring down the cost of my grocery bills, because it is so crazy right now.
What have you noticed most? Because it is a little, there's regional differences too.
So
When
I
you go to the
actually
grocery
noticed,
store, what are you noticing?
so aside from the egg situation, which is definitely huge, actually canned goods. So like the things like coconut oil, garbanzo beans, because I use a lot of canned beans. Things that used to be, I think, really affordable items have now really skyrocketed. That, you know, like I can come back and I'm like, wow, you know, $4 for garbanzo beans when that was like $1.29 or $1.49 before. I really have to think twice. So, you know, garbanzo beans is a great example of a great staple, though, because you can bring that home and use the chickpeas in a recipe. For example, I have like a great smashed chickpea salad, but also take that liquid in there in that can, and that's your egg substitute. So that aquafaba, yeah.
Wait,
so that
what?
liquid in the can. So normally if you buy a can of beans or legumes or something, you know, you drain that liquid out in the sink and you never see it again. But garbanzo beans, you can take use the garbanzo beans, but save that liquid, because that liquid is your egg substitute. So 3 tablespoons of that liquid is a replacer for 1 egg. So there you go. In one of your, so kind of like a dual purpose product. Yeah.
I totally did not know that. And so do you taste it? Do you take, like, for example, so I guess I'm just off the top of my head, you know, I like to make different breads for the kids, banana bread, pumpkin bread, that sort of thing. If I use the garbanzo bean juice for that, would you taste it? Would you taste a little bit of that flavor?
You like, before you add it to your baked good, if you taste it, I mean, it kind of tastes like bean juice. I know, but I swear it's undetectable in baked goods. It's totally undetectable, and it really produces like really light baked good that's light and fluffy, and like people swear by it. I swear by it. So yeah.
I'm like, let's just end the interview now, because that was just like, I've never heard that. I never would expect that. And what a cool tip. Yeah. By the way, you mentioned the canned goods going up. Just to validate that, canned fruits and vegetables have increased almost 20% just in that period from 2021 to 2022. So that's not counting the years before. And that's something tricky, by the way, that I think is a little bit smarter tip on the news side too, is when you start seeing stuff talk about inflation going down or things decreasing, often the data is looking month to month, not necessarily the big picture, which is like, no, this is really, really, this is much higher than you were paying before. So I did mark this. This is one of the things I'd like to try soon. You notice it doesn't take a lot of cooking, but it's this is the crazy good Italian chopped salad, and those are their garbanzo beans. So maybe I'll think about that now and have an idea of saving.
Yeah, I know.
The bean juice. No, it's the worst. So do you plan all your meals? Do you have like a plan going into the week? I've never been able to do that. And I feel like it's one of the reasons why I'm kind of a mess in the kitchen. Do you like plan out what you're going to do for your family, or how do you do it?
You know, kind of like you, my kids are it's really hard to get them to eat vegetables and all of that stuff. So I don't actually. What I do plan is I plan veggies, and I plan to have 2 proteins that I can mix and match during the week. So for example, I'll buy broccoli, cauliflower, maybe some carrots. What else do we buy a lot? Brussels sprouts, sweet potatoes, those type of things. I'll come home, I'll chop those up, put them in my containers, and then 2 proteins. So maybe chicken. We do a lot of fish sometimes, but having cooking all of that stuff up, putting them in the containers, and then mix and match during the week with like different sauces to keep things a little interesting. But for example, if I am going to buy the can of garbanzo beans, I will plan in my head, to make that salad, for example, and then think, okay, I don't want to waste the juice. So then I will make banana bread and use that liquid in there. So I have a couple of different things. I wish I was better about it because, again, this is my job. So oftentimes I'm creating a lot of food for my blog, different recipes, which, some things my kids eat and some things they don't. So I try to plan, but always having protein and veggies on hand that are ready to go, I think is really a time saver.
So do you cook that then on Sunday and kind of have that, or do you wait? Because something like fish, you probably have to cook obviously the day of. But
so usually I do the veggies and like the chicken on a Sunday. What I do with the fish, if I buy it from the grocery store, I'm not ready to eat it right away. When I freeze something, I use my tip of, how to defrost meat and fish really quickly when I'm ready to use, which is really, you just put it in cold water. You take your frozen block of chicken or fish or whatever it is, cold water for 30 minutes, rinse it out, add more water, and then 30 minutes later, you should have perfectly defrosted fish ready to go. And fish is really simple, so it doesn't require a lot. So I pop it in the air fryer or the oven, just with some seasonings. Seasonings are our best friend, and like you said, I think the cost has gone up for things like that too. So don't be afraid to use up what you have in your pantry, because they also don't have a shelf life of forever. Once your spices start kind of losing that, the vibrancy or the potency, it's time to replace them. So it would be a good time now to go into look in your pantry, see what you've got, use up all those spices, and don't be afraid to mix and match and try different things.
That's really good advice, because I feel like there's a portion of the spice drawer or rack that gets used all the time, and then the other side that gets ignored. And then you look at it and you think, it's probably been 5 years since I probably should refresh that or take it out. One of the things you talk about in your book is intuitive eating. And I've heard that term a lot, but I don't really, if I thought of myself intuitive eating, I would say, well, the stuff that I'd really want to eat is all the bad stuff. That's what my intuition's telling me. These things that are not that good for me. That would be just the way I would think about it. But what does intuitive eating mean to you, and how do you kind of apply it to your life?
And I think so. First and foremost, for people that don't really know what intuitive eating is, it's this principle that you eat according to your intuition or what your body is asking for in the moment. And I think that that's a really hard concept sometimes for people to wrap their heads around, like me, especially when I was healing from my eating disorder, because it sounded like a one big free for all, which is oh my gosh, you're telling me there's no food rules, everything's on limits. I can go eat cake, ice cream, pasta, all of these things. And that's what my intuition's telling me. That's what I want. And as I was experimenting and learning how that works, what I learned was when I started adopting that approach, that is kind of what I started doing. I started eating more cakes and cookies and all of these things because that's what it tells me I can do. But what I learned over the course of a month or two was that eating in that way did not make me feel good. I didn't feel physically good eating those things. So naturally my body started craving more fruits, more veggies, things that were less processed. So over time, it's really been a very helpful, freeing tool for me to say okay, I know I can have X, Y, and Z because all foods are on limits. There's no restriction here. There's no rules. And allowing myself to have that, but shifting gears when I feel oh, wow, I have no energy, or I feel I ate this Snickers bar and I feel terrible now because I have, I'm in sugar, I had the sugar high. Now I'm coming down from that. you know, so over time, I would just say it kind of balanced out. But because I come from that background of having an eating disorder, it's been very freeing and helpful for me in the healing process.
This is a personal question, but do you still
Mm-hmm.
struggle with that anymore? Especially when we're
Yeah.
at the beginning of the year, everyone's talking about diets and exercise, and there's so much online. And one of the things you talk about in your book is really
Mm-hmm.
editing your social media feed too, and making sure you're healthy on a couple different levels. But is this something that you feel like you have to continue to manage? Do you feel like it's something
Yeah.
that's in the rear view
It's
mirror?
interesting.
How is it for
So
you?
food no longer triggers me, or like I have, I think years now that have passed, and I'm around food all the time. So it doesn't trigger me at all anymore. But I will say, like, whether you struggle with, a past eating disorder or drug abuse or drug use, alcohol, all of those things, I think what they have in common is kind of like a use of something to control. And I found myself last year just, I love wine, I love cocktails, I love all that stuff. And I was, creating all these cocktail recipes, and I kind of started craving all these yummy cocktails all the time. So I think I had to be really mindful that, when January came around, I was like, wait a second, why am I now craving cocktails when it used to be something with food? So I had to take a good hard look at, whoa, press pause on that. So I think it's always doing constant check-ins with yourself, just to ask yourself what's working and what's not, and adjusting from there. So for me, doing dry January has been like a huge wake-up call for me to be like, okay, I'm so much happier and feel more vibrant and energetic without having my alcohol this month. And do I really want to go, like, all of these things I've just really like, starting the new year, not doing a detox, not dieting, but also trying to like take a few steps back, because the holidays are indulgent. Maybe like it's a great time to start fresh and go through your pantry and go through your refrigerator to say, okay, how can I make more nutritious choices so that I feel my best? I think it's reframing, moving away from talks of, diet culture and dieting, and really about, how do I want to feel this year? Feeling is really important to me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's such a good tip. I did notice
I
your
know, I love
cocktail
them.
recipes. And I love them. And I was like, I probably have bookmarked several of them. I wonder if anyone went into the SmartHER News account. I was like, wow, she's bookmarked a couple things from
I know,
the
I
Defense
love
Department,
it.
and then all of these cocktails from. I'm like, wait a minute. But I too am doing dry January, and it's one of those things that alcohol is tricky. And even though I'm not a very big drinker, sometimes my husband's like, you don't even drink. I'm like, it doesn't matter. I just need to be like,
For sure.
it's not what I'm doing right now. It's not what I'm doing.
Exactly.
I'm just going to take it easy. I just feel like that's the way to go. And I read an interesting thing. You'll appreciate this. Erin Opria has been a guest on SmartHER News before. Marine turned into an amazing personal trainer to some of your top country music stars. She's super cool. And she has a book, and I was flipping through her book. She has a couple books, actually. And I just happened upon this line, and it really stuck with me. And I apologize to everyone now it's going to ruin things for. But it said something to the effect, alcohol has to be treated like a dessert. But so keep that in mind. But a piece of cake probably has more nutrition.
Oh my gosh.
Like,
yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
gosh, that gives you some perspective where you're like, hey, so I won't eat 10 pieces of cake a week. Maybe I should think about this. That's something. So is there anything else in this time period? First of all, I want to go back to the eggs. We're getting a lot of comments on what this huge revelation that we've now had about beans. Is there anything else that you substitute for eggs, and is there anything that else that you can think about, or have there been a different way that you use eggs in the kitchen?
Yeah, so more
mindful.
So definitely being more mindful. So for instance, so I definitely shared on my feed, I have 5 egg substitutes that you can use in your baking. So different ideas like the garbanzo bean, it's aquafaba, it's called aquafaba. Yeah.
Okay, that's so much better than what I was saying. Aquafaba.
Yeah, we've
a lot more
got, you can use a
sophisticated
banana,
and
you can
dangerous.
use silken tofu, you can use flax egg. Flax egg is another fantastic one. Chia seeds, you can make a chia egg. So I have all of those ideas. But also, I think because eggs are so expensive, I really want to savor and enjoy them. So proper preparation to like take a moment to like savor what you're eating. So, you know, today I shared how to make the perfect soft scrambled egg. So if you're a soft scrambled egg person, you don't want, I think we all have those nightmares of going into a hotel buffet and you're like, you know, those crunchy, like, no. So I don't want to waste my eggs and make them like that way, or how to, you know, properly hard boil your eggs so you can peel the shell. Like, so being really mindful about how you use them, you know, for
Okay, what is your tip for the hard-boiled eggs? I did a survey on this through Smarter News back in around Thanksgiving, and it got a lot of really
yeah.
good tips. Some of them have worked better than
Yes,
others.
there's a whole
Do you have a
method to
secret for
properly
that?
preparing the hard-boiled eggs, but to peel them is the ice bath, which many people know, but popping them in there and letting them sit in there for like in that cold, icy water for like 10 minutes before you peel. Like, go do something else in your house, let them sit, because the longer they sit, that's when the egg inside kind of shrinks up a little bit and releases from the shell of the egg so that you can go in there and pull them off without making a total mess. So that's a really good one. Yeah.
What are you really, so is there anything that you're really into right now? Like you go through different kind of fads with your cooking
Yes.
where you're like, I'm really into this. Is there
Yeah.
something
So
that's
I know
kind of
I
got you
said a little
focused?
while ago that
What
I
is it?
don't meal prep extensively because I create so many different meals, you know, and recipes for my blog and for my work and what I do, that I just create the, you know, the vegetables and a couple proteins during the week. But one thing that I've been doing that I've been loving lately is I bought these little divided containers. They're glass containers, but they have little dividers in there. And I've been meal prepping snacks, like those little, you know, you can walk into Starbucks and you buy those. They have these protein boxes that are like $7 or $8. And it's really just like a hard-boiled egg, you know, maybe some nuts, a piece of cheese, and some crackers or something like that. And I'm like, I can make those myself. I bought those glass containers. So I've been kind of like having fun with like getting creative with filling them with good amounts of protein, fiber, and fat. And like, oh, when I'm doing stuff in my kitchen during the day, or I can give a box to my boys, they like having stuff like that. And also using those same containers to meal prep things like overnight oats and chia pudding, that like are easy for grab and go. So kind of just like been having fun with like playing with different combinations. They kind of feel like adult Lunchables. So yeah.
That I love that stuff. And it's so much easier. I find myself throughout the day, I'm so focused on the beginning of the day
Yeah.
with the kids and the family, and then the end of the day with the kids and the family, that in the middle, I'll forget to actually get the
Totally.
protein or the things that I need to keep going. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, why am I screaming at everybody?
Totally.
It's like, oh, because I haven't eaten in like, you know, and those things tend to be easier to grab,
Exactly.
and as long as they're ready to go. Do you have a list with all of your, like, I know you have your ice cube trays, you
Yep.
mentioned an air fryer, you your glass containers.
Yeah,
Are those all
they're
on your blog
mostly
for
on my
people to
Instagram. I
want to
have
check
a
it out?
Instagram highlight that has kitchen items listed where all of the things that I use most frequently are linked there. I have like the tips on how to properly cook hard-boiled eggs, how to, you know, make your own brown sugar at home. A lot of like, you know, staple things on my website, kalejunkie.com. And I'm working on getting more of them up in a place where they're easily accessible for people.
Well, I love all of them. When you show us how it works in the actual item that you're using, it just is so much easier to say,
Yeah.
I'm just going to do exactly what she
Yeah,
said.
I mean, I think at the end,
And that's good.
I just want to, I mean, I guess it's like,
So,
it's all about like baby steps, right? You don't have to walk into, like, you don't have to have an elaborate meal prep routine. You don't have to do it because everybody else is doing it. I think we all have different families, different needs, different budgets. So I think if you pick one or two things that will make your life or your week easier, and sticking to that, health goals and wellness goals become more attainable and achievable, rather than, overhauling your entire life and, doing all of these things because, this person on Instagram does it. Do what works for you and your family and your budget.
It's such great advice. And I already feel like I have a couple tips today, like with the herbs,
Yeah.
which I avoid buying sometimes in the store because I'm worried about wasting them. Or that's such great advice. As we kind of finish up here, what would you say if you could give just a little bit of extra guidance about living smarter? What would be the one change that you would suggest to people that you think could make a really big difference in their lives when it comes to food?
When they ask you at the grocery store for your receipt, I think it's now become commonplace, or at least maybe I'm speaking from my own personal experience. When they ask you for a receipt, I'm always like, no, keep it. I don't want it. But I do think paying attention to your spending practices is really important, especially when it comes to groceries, so that you can come home. And I have a certain weekly budget that I spend on food, even though it's my job and probably costs me more than the average person. But coming home and watching, paying attention to what you're spending on certain things, and then from there, just being more mindful so that you can and also thinking about how you can multitask with a specific ingredient. So collect your receipts, do a weekly or every 2 weeks an inventory of what you're spending, and think do I really need X, Y, and Z before going into the grocery store? Really being more mindful so that you don't come home with excess and you make your money go further. I've noticed that it's really easy for me to just go into the grocery store, pull things, pop them in my cart. I'm like, but I didn't really need that. So really just practical things, and buying things where you can get a lot of use out of them. The flax egg would be buy ground flax seeds, for example. You can spend, I think it's maybe $5 or $6 for a big bag of ground flax, and you can use that not only to make a flax egg in your baking, but you can also add a scoop of that to your protein or your smoothies for more protein, more fiber in your diet if you don't want to spend $30 on a jar of protein powder. So things that are multi-use will make your money go further.
Oh, that's really good advice.
Yes.
Like a little audit.
Yeah.
Do a little audit of what's going on so that you're not just, I do remember the moment this happened a couple months ago where I went into the grocery store, and it was very distinct because I was just grabbing the items that I thought I needed, and they said to me, that's going to be $400. And it was over $400. And I was like, what did I buy? I didn't even buy anything. And what it turned out when I actually did, because I did look at the receipt, it was during that time period where meat prices were really high, and I had bought some meat that I didn't even think about, because you're like, ground beef, it's fine. And it was exorbitant, and it pushed me over. I mean, that's a lot for one grocery trip. I mean, oh my goodness. But it caught me off guard. So I think being aware of that is such a good, smarter tip. What do you do with all the food, by the way, when you cook it? I always wonder this on Instagram. Does your husband come home and your kids come home and you're like, look at this amazing table of beautiful food? Or what
I know, it's so funny.
Give us the
people are always like, do you really eat all that food you make? And I'm like, well, yeah, I do eat the food that I make and share. I mean, of course I do. I love what I make that I'm sharing with you guys, but there's a lot. And so some of it I freeze. That's why we do have a second refrigerator and freezer in our garage. So I do have extra space. And then I have really lucky neighbors that get to try things. I send over care packages all the time. So they love that. My boys will test some things. They'll pass on other things that are, typically the veggie loaded items. They're all about the cookies and the treats. But yeah, so it's mostly sharing with friends, freezing, and, having a lot of, things when I don't feel like cooking, pull them out of the freezer, defrost a chili or something like that, and then I've got dinner ready to go. So another tip would be if you are going to make a recipe that you can freeze, double the recipe while you're at it, while you're already going through the hassle of making the recipe, double it so you can freeze it. And then on nights when you just don't feel like doing anything, instead of reaching for takeout, just defrost and use my method of popping in whatever it is, the container in the cold water, and you can do it.
That's also great advice, because I start off real strong, Monday and Tuesday, and then it's like,
I feel you. I mean,
downhill
it's the
towards
same
end
for
of
me
the
too.
week.
Yeah.
You're like, what am I gonna do? What's happening? What are we eating? Why does everyone need to? Okay, we'll figure it out. So
one is going to turn 6 and one's turning 8. And how old are yours?
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. They're the same. So I have one, well, I have an 8-year-old and I have a 6-year-old, and then I have True, who's, I smile because he's 3.
I did not know
like
you have
all of 3.
Oh my God. Okay,
yeah,
you're my hero.
3 of them, all little, all big personalities. You think, well, one of them's gonna no, all big personalities. And True's usually the one that comes in here. He has a little school today, so this is why Thursdays are a good day for me to chat. So, well, Nicole, this has been awesome. I really appreciate it. So many good tips, and I can't wait to share more of your tips on SmartHER News. I really encourage everyone to check out your book, because it's beautiful. It has a lot of great, interesting recipes. You also have some of the influence of your culture in there, which also adds like a little twist. So you find things like the Italian salad, but also some of your sauces that I didn't think would be as accessible, but they are. So I really thank you for sharing all of this with everybody, and for taking such a leap of faith and creating so much knowledge for so many people. It's really a value add, and especially
thank you for introducing me to your wonderful community, and I feel really honored, and I love all of your work, and just follow along every day, and can't wait to see what you're sharing with us. So thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, I so appreciate it. Well,
alrighty. Bye, guys.
I'll let you go back to the kitchen. We'll see you later. And you can go anywhere you want. The kitchen is where I'm thinking in my mind. All right. Bye, Nicole.
So awesome. I can't wait. Someone's asking, let's see. Regina, you're asking about the book. I know it's backwards, guys, but it's Love to Eat. 75 easy, crave-worthy recipes for healthy, intuitive eating. And she has a great, it's just a beautiful book. And actually, you know what? I'm going to put this in the caption on Instagram if you're listening a little bit later. It won't apply, but if you're going to be on Instagram, why don't I send you one of these books? We'll do a little something in the caption. But it's a beautiful book with so many great recipes. I love having it in the kitchen because it reminds me of Nicole, and I like having that energy, beautiful book from a working mom who took a leap of faith and is really following a path that she is so talented in. So what a great way to kick off a series of SmartHER with. So now I'm curious, who should be our next guest? So January, we're talking a little bit about food, and we could do one sooner than February, but I'll be curious what ideas you'd like to see covered and who you'd like us to talk to. So thank you so much for everything, you guys. Appreciate it. We'll get back to the news and our regularly scheduled program on SmartHER News, which is covering all the news that matters and explaining why it matters, and trying to keep out a lot of the, we're talking about food, keeping out a lot of the baloney. How about that for a new tagline? All right, guys, have a great day. Definitely check out Nicole at Kale Junkie, and I'll see you back here with more at SmartHER News and SmartHERnews.com. Have a great day. Bye, guys.